Did you find that font in a trash can? Because your comics typography stinks. Today, Rochella and I, me, a certified graphic designer, are going to teach you how to improve your graphic design skills and improve your comic.
We'll discuss common problems with comic logos, laying out text, branding, and just some general graphic design stuff, as well as some suggestions on how to actually fix them. So today I'm here with Bree.
Hello.
And I am so excited to have you on because I feel like we're going to address a lot of stuff that honestly kind of bugs me too.
I do have a background in graphic design. I went to school and I work as a graphic designer. So as a comic fan, seeing some comic graphic design mistakes, I thought it'd be nice to point out how to change some things just to make everything look better.
So first off, we're going to talk about common issues with your comics logo. Now, your logo is probably one of the most important, or at least iconic pieces of graphic design within your comic. You can use it on all sorts of things like merchandising, your branding, your advertising. It's almost like the symbol or the little mascot of your comic. Be sure to pay attention. It's important.
Exactly. And it's something that's going to define your brand as well, too. So you don't want to have to keep doing it over and over because you want it to be recognizable as well. So you want to do it right the first time and not have to worry about it as long as your brand goes on. So I went through Canvas and I looked around and kind of saw common mistakes that people were doing with their logos, text, just everything. Just starting off with the logo issues. One of the biggest things I noticed is that the font choice that people pick is really boring. I saw just a lot of very basic sans serif, like Helvetica. Graphic designers are gonna be angry at me for saying that because Helvetica is the favorite font. And then also I noticed like the filling too, that in like the logo that people choose, it doesn't really match the filling of the comic. Like I'll see like a cool medieval comic and then they'll be using a more modern font, or like a cool like sci-fi comic and then they'll be using more like an old scripty font. And then also just bad font pairings as well. I noticed that people have been using a couple different fonts that don't look good together, or just too many fonts. My solutions for those, I think definitely spend a lot more time finding a good font. Looking for fonts is a chore. It's very time consuming. I feel like every graphic designer has spent a long time staring at fonts that they all look the same, but it's worth it in the end. So definitely, like, there's a lot of font options out there. Keep looking. Some free options are Google Fonts or Font Squirrel. They have some good choices. And then for paid options like Adobe Typekit, if you pay for their subscription, has some good choices, or like Creative Market as well has some really cute fonts. And then also going off of kind of the feeling of the comic, think about what like your comic is about and like follow that feeling. Serif fonts feel very more traditional. Sans serifs didn't come around till a lot more recent. Serifs kind of have that fancy feeling too, compared to like sans serif as well. And then just like as an example, like use a serif for a Western and a sans serif for a sci-fi. When you pick out fonts, make sure to use fonts that pair well together. Like usually the rule of thumb is not to use more than 2 to 3 fonts together. 3 is pushing it. Usually 2 is pretty good. And then also don't pair 2 similar fonts together. Pick the 2 that are very different. So don't use like a really similar sans serif. Use like a sans serif and a script together, or use like if you do use 2 sans serifs, use like 1 thin and then 1 bold one. Another thing I noticed with logos, as well as a mistake I saw, was colors being a big issue. Colors can make or break a logo. So make sure that when you're picking it out, you're also considering your brand, but then also thinking about using your logo for various different things, and then also working on a variety of backgrounds too. Usually what I like to do when I make a logo is I first make it in black and white, and then see if that works and reads okay, and then I'll add in colors. And then also like considering future like merchandising. Too many colors gets really expensive.
How do you decide on what colors go well with your brand? Like, what thought process would you suggest to someone who has no idea?
That is a good question. Usually you like going off of, there's color theories that you can follow. Those aren't always right, and I don't like to stick too closely to those because like I feel like they're not applicable to everything. But I think definitely for, let's say you have like a Western, I feel like you definitely would not want to use neon colors for like a Western logo. Unless I guess there's aliens in your Western, then that might be cool. But just kind of thinking, I like to think of like how this would fit into your world that you're creating with your comic. I like to pick one main color, and then I'll have like various like subcolors I'll use throughout, just to like accent. But just the main color for everyone is a lot more memorable than just a bunch of different colors. And then finally, with what I've noticed with the logos is that there's either too much going on. So there'll be like really fancy illustrations and like artwork with it. My general advice is to keep it evergreen. Save your future self time, avoid drawings, because as an artist, I know for me, my drawing has significantly improved after just drawing a comic for a year. And then since your art does tend to improve over time, you don't want to have to keep going back to your logo and then updating your art to fix with your new technical skill and style. And then also another thing that I've noticed with some logos is opposite, which is I've noticed there's too little work put into them. Don't just slap on some text and call it good. Definitely spend some time to create something you're really happy with. You're going to be using your logo a lot, and it's going to become like a symbol of like your brand or your comic. And then really think about what story you want to tell with your logo as well too. People are going to see that probably first, so you want them to get a good idea of kind of what story you're going to tell. And then also you can add some variety to your text. You can stack it, you can rotate it, you can break the grid too, which is a cool concept. Add some variation, some thought, and some more fun into your logo, but don't overdo it. Not too much, not too little.
What exactly do you mean by breaking the grid for people who haven't heard of that term before?
Yeah, breaking the grid, so usually in graphic design, hopefully I summarize this well so my teacher doesn't come back and yell at me. So when you put text in, you're usually following like a grid, like columns. And then when you want to bring attention to a certain aspect of like, let's say a magazine page, you'll have everything following a set of columns. And the one thing you want to bring the most attention will break the grid and go outside of the column. And then that way everything will fit in nicely, but then you'll still have that one thing that's slightly off. And since human brains are really good at following patterns and noticing when something's different, that's a great way to bring in something like a way to catch attention.
Yeah, I could see how that would help. You have to keep in mind that your logo needs to be able to like stretch and shrink. So it should look good at a normal size, but if you need to make it really small to put on the corner of one of your pictures for Instagram, or in my case on one of my thumbnails, people should still be able to see it and recognize it and know that it belongs to your brand.
Exactly, yeah. Logos need to work really small and really big. So it's always good to make it like as small as would be on a business card and print it out and make sure you can still read it. That's just a quick way to check if your design works.
Ree sent me a message. I'll read it loud and clear. It's very important for you all to hear. And that is, smash that like button now if you feel like you've learned something far in that video. Yeah, smash it. It's smash time. Smash the like button.
Smash!
Smash! Graphic design unhinged.
You've never seen graphic design like this before.
Throw away the Comic Sans, embrace the papyrus.
Papyrus is on thin ice, so we'll see if it lasts to the next round. Will it get booted off the island?
I don't know. We'll find out on the next episode, or maybe we'll switch to wingdings. So next up, we are going to talk about body text treatment, or just putting your text in the bubbles, putting them on the page so the people can actually read.
Body text treatment, I feel like, is really like one of the most important things you can do for your comic, because if people can't read it, they're not gonna stick with it. They're not gonna try to squint or like zoom in. Usually they'll just give up and move on to something else. As I was looking through a bunch of different comics, some things I've noticed is like the main common problems where there's no hierarchy. Hierarchy is really important to show what's most important for people to read. I know for me, when there's large bodies of text, I like to just like skim over it. Hierarchy stops that. It slows down your readers, and it shows them what you want them to read first. How you do that is you avoid large bodies of text, and then you also separate it as well too. One thing I noticed is that a lot of people like to make it like a novel. People are here to read a comic, so make sure to separate it. Put long paragraphs in different bubbles. If you have to like make a new scene, just help like the readers, because I know for me, I want to enjoy the pictures, not just text. And then another thing too is that you also need to emphasize what you think is important. What you can do to do that is like you can use different fonts, you can bold, you can italicize, just kind of to help set your tone better. I feel like getting kind of the tone of voice across in a comic can be hard. That kind of playing around with the text more can definitely help improve the feel and then get across the emotion a lot better.
And just curious, how many fonts on average do you think a comic should use? Because I know it'll vary between series, but like for someone who's just getting started and maybe they're picking out fonts for the first time, would be a good number to aim for to make sure you're not just using the same font the whole time?
I still think the 2 to 3 rule fits in here pretty well. Usually when you're picking out a text for like speech bubbles, for one that has like a bunch of variations in like thickness, that way you can bold, italicize, and then also you can use another one for like sound effects, and then like for any like super extreme moments too, you can have like another font for that too. I think you just don't want to go too crazy with way too many fonts because it might get a little confusing.
Yeah, it can be a bit overwhelming.
Yeah, it's hard too with like background text, with like the sound effects. Like I feel like I'm not an expert on that one. I have looked through a lot of different comics to see what other people do. So people will change like the font to be like with like whispering or screaming or like screeching. That one's really, I'm not sure on that one. So I think there's a lot of good resources for like comics out there. I'm still trying to figure that one out. I'm sorry.
Oh, don't worry about it. What helps me a lot is when I was first getting started looking at old scanslation guides from back in the day, people scanslating manga for the first time, and then people realizing that people who have no knowledge in graphic design make sometimes some pretty odd choices. So there's a lot of old guides on how not to make odd choices that are specifically for basically fan translations that I'd really recommend just Googling and checking out, because they still apply. Text is mainly the same, fonts go in and out of style, but for a comic, you're generally looking for the same sorts of things, which is readability.
Definitely. That's good to know about those.
Yeah.
I just like had a flashback of me trying to like read like these sad scanlations. Yeah, overall, I feel like for background text, just see what like the masters are doing. Just take what works. Another issue I noticed in a lot of comics was a lack of ragging. What ragging does is it basically you decide which words belong on which line, and by checking your ragging, it just makes it a little easier for people to read along. Since it's tiring for eyes to have to jump around, you can make it easier by taking the time to arrange the text in the speech bubbles. You can also make sure to avoid hyphenating any text because that cuts the word in half and makes it a lot harder to read. Also, I noticed an issue with justification. Make sure to center justify text in your bubbles. Left justify just looks weird, and then I feel like it doesn't fit the fill of the usually like the typical circle comment bubbles.
Yeah, and if you're doing right justify, I have a lot of questions for you.
Yeah, me too. Why is my first question. But going on that with text justification, when you have really long paragraphs, left justify them. Don't center justify them. So like if you have a page full of text, just because it's really like tiring for your eyes to go back and forth for center justification for like large groups of text, that is definitely something I would recommend. But usually in comics, you shouldn't be having large pages of text, just in case you do.
Yeah. And if you are, you might want to, unless it's an author's note at the end, you might want to think through why you're doing that.
And then overall, just in general for text, make sure you use a legible font size. Usually for comics, the standard is all caps. The average recommended font size for mobile is 16 pixels or 16 point. Fonts can vary, so make sure you test it out first. I know I have a hard time when I can't read like a comic because the font's too small. I usually move on, so that's something to consider. Just another thing too is to make sure there's a high contrast between the text and the background. Some colors are pretty naturally dark, such as red. When you put red against a black background, it makes it harder to read, especially for those who have not such great eyesight. So just make sure to maybe put white around it or something to help your readers that have a hard time with contrast.
Something I didn't discover until I was probably halfway through the run of my original comic, maybe a little earlier, is just adding an outline to text, if it's not just like black on white or white on black, can really increase the reader's ability to actually get through the text.
Yeah, definitely. That helps so much too, and it doesn't take away from the text at all. Just make it easy for your readers to read through. They're not gonna try and stick through and read if it gets really difficult. And then you can also just integrate the text with your art in the background to help it feel more apart. And if you just are struggling to, just see what your favorite comic artists are doing and then take what works.
What are your thoughts, and this might fall more into opinion territory, on people using different colored bubbles, not just for one special panel, but say one character has one color speech or a different colored text depending on the character, just throughout the comic generally? I'm just curious what you have to say about that.
I think it can work if you have a very limited cast. I think if you have a bigger cast, you're gonna have a hard time finding more colors to use. And usually certain colors too, like yellow or orange, I feel are hard to read for long periods of times. I think it's a cool concept. I haven't seen it done in person, but I could see some problems. But I think if someone was aware of having a smaller cast, not having to pick out very close colors and then making readable colors, I think it could be cool. I don't know. What are your thoughts on it?
I just think it's interesting because I've seen examples of it done extremely well, and I've also seen examples of it being used as more a crutch when people don't understand how to put in what's the line connecting the balloon to the speech line thingy? I don't know, but
yeah,
I've seen it used as a crutch.
Is there
when
a name for that?
Maybe.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
The comments will let us know. But I've seen it used as a crutch when people are bad at placing those, or they don't want to draw the character in the shot, which is fine, because there's all sorts of things we do to avoid drawing extra characters. But they do it all the time, and it just gets confusing. And you have to remember what color belongs to which, and it's a little overwhelming.
Yeah, I think definitely it should work without the colors. Because also there's colorblind people too, so think about them while you put in a bunch of different colors, if the contrast is there and if it reads without the colors, and then the colors just kind of accent it. I think that would be nice. But
yeah, that's a great point. I wouldn't have thought of that.
Okay, so your brand is not you, but your comic, what you want to show the world. Some things I noticed artists doing not that great was just a general lack of consistency. Some things you can do to kind of help bring the consistency, because you want people to recognize you right away, is you can use the same elements throughout everything, the same bubbles throughout your comic. Like in Purple Hyacinth, when someone lies, the text turns red, and that is like a whole thing throughout the story. So like when you see red, you're, oh no, they're lying. And that's ruined me when I read other comics with red text. I'm like, oh, they're lying. I'm like, oh wait, this is different. Whatever like kind of little cool thing you pick like that, just to use it consistently, so your readers know when they see it, they're like, oh, this is this. Outside of your comic, like extend your brand. When you're going on like social media, use like the same colors or elements. Just generally make it easy for people to recognize your work. Some people I think are doing a good job. Like whenever I see them post, I'm like, oh yeah, that's them. Like Grey Reaper, they do a great job. You want people to know who you are. You want to make it easy, stick it in people's minds.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the other thing is too, when you sort of like expand your brand, and as well as when you use the same elements over and over again, people don't get that also saves time. There's no need to come up with a different formula every single time you make a post or you make an episode. Reusing the same stuff will get your audience used to it. People like consistency. They like seeing similar things over and over again. It makes them feel familiarized with it. And it also saves you time to just have to change a little every time you post.
Yeah, definitely. You can't build a car if you're too busy trying to figure out how to reinvent the wheel. Use all that creative freedom for your story. Branding, just follow what works with your brand.
Yeah. I don't know if this is super graphic designy, but do you have any tips about social medias and social media in general you think people should know? Or just creating posts?
Instagram is awful. Their algorithm hates artists.
You're not wrong.
Kidding, no. With like online, I feel like everything's always constantly changing. So like people who change with it usually do the best.
If you guys need places to post, I really recommend checking out sites like MySpace, Tumblr. It's great. Stay up to date.
It's up to date. I posted on Tumblr. I got 2 likes. It was so amazing, guys. Totally recommend it.
I heard OnlyFans is going great places too. They're trying to get people to join their site and post cooking tutorials.
Yeah. Oh man, I'm excited to see what happens. I wonder if it's gonna go the same way as Tumblr, or what's gonna happen there. I'm curious.
I think probably if I was a normal content creator, which I am, I would not want my brand to be associated with them, because even as they try to move away from their current content, which is fine, there's still like all kinds of like, that's what they're known for. People mention OnlyFans in its current context in like a lot of very popular rap songs about a word that we can't say because YouTube. But
yeah, YouTube.
It's gonna be a very difficult pivot, and they're going to be pushing away a lot of their big money makers in favor for people who are probably very hesitant to go on there in fear of ruining their brand. So yeah, good luck.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we'll see what happens there. I'll bring the popcorn. So
yeah, maybe by the time this video comes out, we'll know.
So I do make a comic. People are gonna look at it and say this girl doesn't know graphic design, but I only do good graphic design when I get paid.
What a mood.
Yeah. My comic's called Live Die Love. It's a romance action. Read it if you want or not. I'm not your mom.
But you should read it. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of these valuable graphic design tips with everyone.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for letting me finally put my degree to use.
All right. Bye, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.